You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I wanted to welcome to the Final Say Radio program our good friend Mark Langfan. Mark is a chairman for Americans for a Safe Israel, and Mark, I'm just going to call it what it is. You're a one-man army. You're fighting a war to prevent Israel from digging its own grave with the help and complicity of its best friend and strongest patron, the United States of America. And we got to know each other because when Brett and I were in Israel recently doing our own 2.5-week deep discovery tour, we used some of the maps and things we're about to discuss extensively, and the perception I consider Brett and I very informed, and the perception versus the reality is something that you really can't understand in a two-dimensional world. You have to comprehend it in 3 dimensions, and you have to comprehend it with an open mind and put all the politics aside and look at the reality of the situation on the ground. Mark, welcome to the Final Say.
Thanks for having me, guys. I was listening to you before, and I wish all radio shows evince the rationality and calmness and prescience of your show.
Well, thank you. Well said. So, listen, the first thing I want you to do is introduce to the audience and give them a quick sense of what is it that you guys, why is especially the maps and the information behind them, why is it so important? And what are the most critical takeaways that people need to understand from your work, especially in light of the quote unquote peace process and the detriment that it might actually have to Israel and how that relates to your maps?
Well, how I generally approach things is my name is Mark Langfan, and I'm chairman of Americans for a Safe Israel. But I think the real name of my organization should be Americans for a Safe Israel for America, in that I'm an American, and while I'm a Jewish American, beginning and ending and beginning, I'm an American. And at core, Israel has to be, when I'm, yes, Israel is a democracy, yes, all of those things. But at the end and the beginning of the day, it has got to be in America's absolute best interest to have Israel there. For instance, if it weren't in America's best interest, we would have to look at it and say, well, it isn't. But the cold, hard reality is that when you look at Israel, what I do is I put it on a map, and anyone can go on to my website and look at my map. But the specific maps that you were talking about, what I did was I put Israel on a map of the Middle East, and when you look at Israel and the Middle East, you'll see something very dramatic. In that if you look at Israel as a seam line between east and west, what you'd see is just in the Middle East alone, not Iran, not India, not Pakistan, not Nigeria, just the Middle East alone, there's about 370 million Muslims. And to the very northwest, there are 11 million Greeks. And the only non-Muslim country between 370 million Muslims who control about 60% to 65% of the world's oil supply, and 11 million Greeks who are a NATO ally of the United States, is the 6 million Jews in Israel. So, in essence, Israel is the first and last line of defense between 370 million Muslims and Greece. And when you look at it that way, all of a sudden, the general statement that Israel is the small Satan and the United States is the big Satan becomes something a little different. It becomes Israel is the tip of the West spear against 370 million Muslims, which I'm not saying the Islam itself as a religion is violent. What I'm saying is political Islam and political and jihadist Islam is violent, and unfortunately, political Islam and jihadist Islam is in control of the 370 million Muslims. So, where are we is if God forbid something happens to Israel, what you're looking at is not the Jews in Israel having to deal with the Palestinians in the West Bank. You're talking about 18-year-old Americans having to go to Greece to somehow fight the Muslims. That's what you're talking about. And when I'm in a congressional office, I have a very simple thing I say. I say, you think the $3 billion that you're spending on Israel is a lot of money? And they say, yeah. And I say, I agree, it is a lot of money. But how much will it be if, God forbid, Israel is not there, and you get a Muslim tsunami, caliphate, / whatever you want to call it, vectoring northwest right into Greece? How much is you going to have to put into the American defense budget in years 2, 3, 4, and 5 to budget for that kind of event? $100 billion. So that's where we are. And you can't really understand it unless you look at a map, you look at a population map, and you ask yourself the simple question, is Israel a strategic value to the United States? And I got to tell you, I was just speaking to a friend of mine who's a very high-level person, and he just had a whole bunch of meetings with actual high-level Greek officials, and he brought my maps to them. And actually, they were arguing with him exactly this point, that Israel is a vital defense for Greece. And he was a little bit shocked because he thought he was going to have to argue the point. Instead, they're arguing the point to him, that Israel is a strategic value to Greece. Now, all you can say is it's one thing that Obama has destroyed the 1/5 or whatever it is of the American economy with this Obamacare. Well, we're looking at an Obama policy in the Middle East that has set the entire Middle East into flames. And we were told that, Obama is Muslim friendly. He understands the Muslims. He's going to make peace with the Muslims. Well, gee whiz, if this is making peace with the Muslims, where from Gibraltar to the Khyber Pass, you've got hundreds of thousands of people being murdered, bombed. God only knows what he considers war. And the only island of stability in this entire maelstrom of the Middle East is Israel, and the peace process that Obama is now pointing a gun at Israel's head about is virtually intended to undercut, if not to destroy the only island of stability in the Middle East. So that is why every American has to get out a map and look at it, and has to call their senator and congressman, or go on my website or call me. You can ask John for my number. I'll talk to anybody about this, because we are in a situation very, very similar to World War II, where we had an ally of Great Britain, but they weren't our allies. Great Britain was fighting Germany for a year and a half, almost 2 years before we got involved to defend Great Britain. Britain had been destroyed by Germany. We'd all be speaking German now. The same concept is with Israel. If Israel is destroyed by this Islamic wave, we are in for it as Americans.
You know, Mark, you make a great case for, and I'm going to use your own words because I think they're just very succinct. You know, you've made mention of Israel being the first and the last line of defense for the West. You've had another, and I think it's a brilliant statement, where you've compared Israel not to the end game, as a lot of people think. There's many people who seem to be very comfortable with the idea of giving up Israel, kind of like many people wanted to do with Poland.
They think
right,
that's
yeah. Right, but you call it, you treat it like a gateway drug. You call it the appetizer. Exactly.
The appetizer. Okay, and let me give you. I fibbed, if you forgive me. Okay, I said the only non-Muslim country between 370 million Muslims and 11 million Greeks is Israel. I fibbed. There is another non-Muslim country. It's called Cyprus, with a total population of about 1 million Christians. So could you imagine what would happen to Cyprus if, God forbid, Israel wasn't protecting it? Okay, it'd be wiped out.
Of course they would, because their population is roughly 2/3 Greek, and about 1/3 is taken over already by Turkey.
Yeah, exactly. The north was already occupied by Turkey, and Turkey says all of Crete, all of Cyprus is Turkish. In fact, just as a little bit of a side, if anybody ever listens to or watches the Shakespearean play Othello, what was Othello about? Othello was the Venetian Moor who was defending the Christians in Cyprus against the Muslims. This has been going on for hundreds of years. But Obama thinks in his either delusional or worse perspective that somehow he's going to achieve peace. It's just a fraud on the American people, and it's a fraud on the West. You were saying?
Now, it is. Just to wrap up on Turkey is a whole other level. The outgoing strategic area that I'll let Brett jump in on. One thing I will ask you to do before we break and move over to kind of the big strategic things that are also affecting Israel is the fact that if Israel falls, is the question you ask. One of the things that your maps have taught me, besides the bird's eye view of Israel, is the topographical aspects of Israel and why giving up the West Bank in its entirety based upon the Kerry-Obama plan is virtual suicide for Israel.
Absolutely. Whatever. Do you want me to talk about
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. Jump in.
Okay.
Explain why.
Well, this is the key. Again, when you talk about the West Bank and the way it's been discussed, people think it's like a little bank of a river somewhere that's far away from Israel proper. The West Bank is actually a mountain range, not the Rockies, because it's not that there's not it doesn't take up a lot of lateral area, but rise and run, it's actually steeper than the Rockies, and it is a mountain range overlooking the coastal plain of Israel, which holds about 70 to 80% of Israel's population and 80% of industrial base. So the key is, well, what's the big deal here? Okay, the big deal is two things. First of all, they've been firing from the Gaza Strip. Once Israel took itself out of the Gaza Strip, they were able to smuggle these very small weapons called Katyusha rockets, which are sort of like glorified Roman candles that can blow up your ceiling. And they have a range of about 20 kilometers, 12 miles. And the key is, if Israel gives up the West Bank, the Palestinian terrorists that are funded by Iran and by Al-Qaeda and by God only knows who can smuggle the same kind of rockets into the West Bank that they smuggled into the Gaza Strip. But this is the key difference. Almost all the area around the Gaza Strip is really relatively empty farmland. But all of the area near the West Bank holds 4 million people in about 400 square miles. Okay, right on the this coastal plain. So a rocket from Montana into Montana really isn't going to kill much, but a rocket from Brooklyn into Manhattan is going to set the entire Manhattan into a panic. And therefore, what's going to happen is these rockets aren't going to be going into empty space. They're going to be going into the very heart of Israel, including, for instance, Ben Gurion Airport. You don't need even an anti-air missile to totally destroy Israel's air traffic. All you need is one of these Katyusha rockets that gets lobbed into Ben Gurion Airport, blows up the 747, and you know what? All of Israel's insurance will get pulled throughout the world, that nothing can fly into and out of Ben Gurion Airport. And you have people like Livni and Lapid saying, oh, it's going to be bad for Israel's economy if there's this little boycott. Well, man, it will be catastrophic for Israel's economy if one rocket falls from the West Bank into Tel Aviv. But it gets worse. And this is where we as Americans can put our foot down and make a huge, huge, huge impact. And I hope this becomes a theme because it's going to be hitting very soon. The only way Obama is going to be able to push Israel out of the West Bank is if we put U.S. peacekeeping troops into the West Bank. That is his plan. He intends to put U.S. troops into the West Bank. And everybody knows that U.S. troops did such a great job with the terrorists in Iraq. Obama did such a great job with the terrorists in Afghanistan that he's pulling out and retreating from all of these places after we've done a terrible, terrible job, and he's going to put them into the West Bank to get killed.
And now, how about Lebanon, Beirut?
Yeah, we put troops into Lebanon. Okay, could you imagine if American troops get put into the West Bank to quote unquote protect Israel, and lo and behold, you've got these Katyusha rockets flying back and forth, over the troops into Israel, and then Israel has to defend themselves? He is putting those troops in because just like he put them in Afghanistan, Secretary Gates says when he put them into Afghanistan, he had absolutely no plan. In fact, his whole plan was a political plan to put the troops in so he'd shut the right wing up. And then he promised to take the troops out the very same time, so he placated all of his left-wing fanatics. Mm-hmm. And what did it produce? It produced 1,300 dead American soldiers. He has got the blood of 1,300 American soldiers who died in Afghanistan because it is a politically motivated gambit to win re-election. And he is now going to take those same precious American troops and put them into Israel and, in fact, destabilize and catastrophically hamstring our one island of stability in the Middle East.
Yep, Mark.
Insanity.
It absolutely is, Mark. I want to make a couple comments. We're getting a little short on time, but I think this is important to say. One is, John and I, when we were in Israel, our group that we were with met with Danny Dayan in the West Bank. He was absolutely fantastic, and boy, did he ever give us an education. But he literally pointed out, over the small horizon and said, "That's Tel Aviv." He said, you could see it clearly as day, and then you all understand that you could put something small on your shoulder and hit it. And He's absolutely correct. And important for the listener, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the width of the West Bank is greater than the width of the remaining area where you're talking about this enormous population of people live in Israel.
From the Jordan to the Mediterranean is about 40 miles. The West Bank is about 30 miles of that 40 miles. So Israel is only 10 miles left, east-west, with this mountain range that is 30 miles east-west hanging right on top of it. It's like an artillery soldier's dream. I don't know if any of you, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are history aficionados, but there was a place in Vietnam where the Viet Cong killed the French the same exact way. It's called Bien Bien Phu, where they had the heights. But second issue, yes, it's 30 and as opposed to 10.
And by the way, when you go up north in Israel, it's no different. Up along Lebanon and up along Syria. I mean, these are all strategically positioned areas that Israel must hold, not can negotiate, must hold. And I think we all agree on that. Mark, just about a minute left, so a fairly quick answer. Barack Obama has, I think we'd all agree, been very poor with his policy. Thank God the people in Egypt are making better decisions and literally throwing the Muslim Brotherhood out. But do you think that what's going on in Syria right now, with the inflow of fighters from all throughout Africa and the Middle East, the influence of Iran, the inability of this administration to either do anything or to understand what's going on, what do you think the impact will be there?
I think the big answer is look what Obama does, not what he says. And if you do that, you realize that Obama is in fact an Iranian protector. He has protected Assad. And Assad is Iran's handmaid. And he has essentially watched 150,000 people be murdered. Now, there is a problem in that part of the opposition is extremely radicalized. But the answer was, in the very early part of the revolution, it wasn't. And that's when Obama totally refused to arm what was an indigenous moderate opposition, which would have destroyed the topologic link of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Because you have to remember, what Obama did by leaving Iraq the way he did was give it to Iran.
Yes.
So the bottom line is Obama has only made enemies with all of our Sunni allies or Sunni partners at terrible expense to the strategic posture of the entire area.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, listen, I'm going to have to say goodbye. Please, real quick, if you can give the website one more time so people can go check it out and find out more.
It's just my name, marklangfan.com.
Excellent. Mark, we're going to have you back. It's been great having you, and we'll have you back and we'll pick up this conversation. Again, thank you so much, Mark.
Remember, fight the U.S. troops on the West Bank. God bless you guys.
Absolutely. And you as well, Mark. Have a good day.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Again, folks, that's Mark Langfan. That's MarkLangfan.com. Great maps, great information, great guest.